Yeah, but this is a review question from section 1 because I didn't put any in there. Okay, so review question from 31.1. Which statement is not correct concerning the origins of seed plants?
Well, I know for sure it's not B.
Correct. It's not B. Yep.
I kind of want to say it's like C and A. It's not A. Is it D? Is it A?
It's not A. Why do you say D?
I didn't say it.
Oh, someone said D.
I knew it. In our notes, it just doesn't give any a lot of description about the progenitor.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
just like
You're right. It is D, because they don't really share a lot of features of our angiosperms. Yes, they do. Like, so I'll just go back to that slide where they mentioned the progymnosperms right here. Yes, they did have secondary vascular tissues, but they were spore-bearing plants. Angiosperms are seed-bearing plants. So yes, it is D. True or false? In contrast to seedless plants, in seed plants, the whole gametophyte, rather the sperm, moves to the female gametophyte. So seedless plants, how does the male gametophyte, well, let's just talk about the gametophyte. It swims to it. Is it the whole gametophyte? Or no, it's only part of it, because the male the sperm is made in the male gametophyte, right? So not the entire thing goes to it, only a part of it. So then in seed plants, let's see, where did we talk about seed plants? The male gametophyte is the pollen grain.
So
it's the whole thing.
So then it's true.
So then it's true. Okay. Woohoo, we worked that one out. All right. So I think this is where we left off. The reproductive cycle in gymnosperms and how it's a very long process. We have pollination, but the female gametophyte's not mature at pollination. You have to wait for it to actually, for that pollen to fuse with the egg. So it could take days to weeks for it to travel there. And then once it does, or even years, then you have fertilization. So I think I was showing you pictures of, this is a male pine cone. You can see the pollen being dusted from it. The cross section just showing the pollen in there. How it has those two little buds, those air pockets, so it's buoyant, so it can kind of float. Here is the female. It starts off as fleshy, and then it will harden. So then here's the pollination part of it. So you can see that this is the opening, the micropyle, and the pollen is just about to fuse with an egg somewhere in here. I'm not exactly sure where it's at, but yeah. So there's the archegonium. That's going to turn into or make the egg. So. Okay, so we'll talk about fertilization in a later section here, and it's a little bit more in depth. So, all right, so we were going through gymnosperms, and we just covered conifers. Okay, so there are 4 groups of gymnosperms. Conifers are the largest. Now we're moving into the cycads. So some fast facts about cycads. Slow growing, again, tropical, subtropical regions. When you look at them, they look like palms. the one thing that sets them apart from palms is that they actually produce cones. And you can see some of the cones, like in this picture, it's at the base. And then over here, it's also just kind of laying on the ground like Easter eggs or something. We're still tied to a little bit of water here. Sperm is released within the ovule and it swims to the archegonium. According to your book, these are the largest sperm cells among all living organisms. So I'm like, oh, okay. Cycads are also facing extinction, so there's not a lot of them. Disney World plants a lot of cycads. Okay, I remember when I was waiting in line at Pandora for one of the river rides or something, one of the Avatar ride. This is my actual picture. And my husband's like, okay, really? I'm like, oh my God, look at the cycad. So, yeah. Okay, extra information. So cycads were around with when dinosaurs ruled the world. Okay, so just showing you an artist rendition of cycads. This is where we find them now. So tropical, subtropical region. Okay. One question I'd like to pose, and you don't need to respond, but we had Earth as Pangea, and then it broke up into continents, and you can see that it's pretty widely scattered. Like it doesn't exactly fit, but how could cycads have such this worldwide distribution if their seeds are way too large? They're heavy, they're dense, they don't really float. Birds aren't going to carry them. They're not going to fly through the air. So it's just kind of a...
So animals eat them and then
maybe. Or, yeah, that's one way. I'm just curious. So some more pictures. Actually, these are repeat pictures, but they can grow pretty tall, 3 to 50 feet tall. Okay, so yeah, cycads. Okay, the cones. So the male cone versus the female cone. The female cone tends to be at the base, and these guys obviously tend to be up higher. So the cones can be very massive, as you can see here, and pretty heavy, 95 pounds. Crazy. All right, some more female cones. All right, I'm done. Moving on to the third group, gametophytes. So a unique thing about gametophytes is that they have xylem vessels or vessels, and vessels are very common in angiosperms. So gametophytes are the only gymnosperms that have vessels. And what vessels are, they're just efficient conducting cells that help them carry, water or dissolved minerals, nutrients throughout the plant. Okay, there are 3 genera underneath the gametophytes, and you will need to know them for I think that they're vocab matching terms, okay? Good luck trying to say this one. Welwitschia, Ephedra, and genetum. Okay, so here's genetum, Ephedra, and Welwitschia. Does this one stand out at all to you guys at all? Have you heard of that term before? No?
How's it pronounced?
Ephedra?
Sounds
Sounds like a what?
like a drug.
It is a drug. Absolutely. Yeah, so we'll get into that. So Ephedra, a little bit more common throughout the world. Genetum, not so much, a little bit smaller. And then the X's, I can't even find the X's. Oh, there it is, right down there, 1X. So the Welwitschia, which I'm going to discuss first, it's a very rare plant. They know exactly where all of them are at on planet Earth. Okay, so this is what this Welwitschia kind of looks like. And when you look at it, you're like, well, that's a lot of leaves. No, it's 2 leaves. It's 2. They just get frailed or they split with age. You only find these organisms in the Namib Desert of Africa and then the surrounding area. So I'm going to show you a picture where they've actually mapped out every single one. So they have it, every little dot right here is where one is at. Okay, So you find them in the Namib Desert. Very, very exclusive. And you can see there they are, all scattered right there. 2 leaves. They can be somewhat large, if you want to think of it as large, but yeah, reference. Yeah. All right, ephedra. Sounds like a drug. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It produces ephedrine. Okay, so not only that, it also has caffeine in the stems. These 2 compounds are alkaloids, and we tend to use them a lot in cough medicine. Okay, but yeah, you can take ephedra and put it into other hard drugs like methamphetamine. There's something else I wanted to say with ephedra. Cold medicines, drugs, Herbalife, weight loss pills. Okay, so yeah, herbal remedies for weight loss, which can lead to strokes and heart attacks, just so you know. But you find ephedra usually in desert arid conditions.
So it's kind of like caffeine, like it just makes your heart race.
Yes. Yep. So supposedly it like increases your metabolism. Yeah. So it does produce a seed, and these are bracts. But yeah, but in the stems you find the caffeine and the ephedra. Okay. So all right, some more pictures. Just various pictures. All right, moving on. The final group of gymnosperms are the ginkgos, or the ginkophytes. There's only 1 species left. When we look at our fossil record, we can see that they were widely distributed around the world, but you no longer find them in the wild today. A lot of times they are part of some planned garden or park. Cities will plant them along the roads because they're very resistant to air pollution. So yeah, if you come across a ginkgo, someone planted it there. A seed didn't fall and germinate. The sperm also have flagella, so we're still somewhat kind of tied to water. But one thing about the ginkgos is that they are dioecious, which means they have both male and female reproductive structures produced on separate trees. Separate trees. So there's like a male tree and then a female tree. Okay, that's what that means. The seeds of the female trees smell terrible. Absolute, like the worst freaking smell in the world. I'm not kidding you. Gustavus has a few on their campus walks, and when the seeds fall, it smells like rancid butter, like rotten butter or vomit. So when that happened, everyone avoided that route and just kind of went around, because I think it's like right in front of Old Main. Yes, it's right in front of Old Main, so then people just like went behind Old Main. It's yeah. Okay. So some fossils of ginkgos that, yes, they have been around for quite a long time here.
Hi.
Hello.
Good morning to all of you. I didn't bring my key. I gotta come through just so I can
Oh,
get it
yeah,
out loud.
no problem. I forgot it was Wednesday.
I'm only gonna be here 2 hours, so be quiet.
Okay.
I just gotta make sure the light comes on. Okay. Don't want a phone over or anything. Thank you.
Yep. So fertilization, the female part will actually secrete this pollination droplet, so that way the pollen can land on it, and then it will swim to the egg a little bit. So yeah, and here's some more seeds of the females. Yuck. Okay, so in summary, we went through the cycads, the ginkgos, the conifers, and the gametophytes. Okay. Review question: what is? Oh, that's a typo. What is the literal definition of gymnosperms? C. Naked seeds. Which of the following is not a gymnosperm? A. Okay, that's actually a angiosperm. The oldest tree is what type and how old? It is D, the bristle cone pine, 4,900 years. What phylum of gymnosperms has vessels?
C. Yeah, the xylem. It's C, isn't it?
Is it the gametophytes? Oh, I thought it was cycads. You sure?
Yeah, it says in the gametophytes that they have xylem vessels, and they're the only gymnosperm.
Oh, okay. So it's wrong on my key. Okay. Yes, okay, sorry. Yes, so it's the genetophytes. Man, for some reason I thought it was cycads.
So are they kind of almost like, it says like that the cycads are facing extinction, but like if there's only one species of like the ginkophytes, could you like say that?
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with like the genetophytes?
Well, it's just that the genetophyte, the weird looking leaf thing, we haven't really been able to like replicate that anywhere in the world. With ginkgos, yeah, we can just plant them, you know, so.
Yeah, because like on the map, there look like there's only like 30 dots on there.
Yeah, you're right. There's about that many, so. Okay. Which statement concerning the pine tree life cycle is not true? This, just read through all of them. I know it's wordy.
I want to say it's not D.
It is D.
It's not D. You're right. It is not D.
It's like she said, like,
I know, I
no.
was gonna
Why do you say C?
Because still the other ones have more pockets.
Yeah, you're right. Because the prefix megaspores is female, and micro, it would be the microspores for males. So it's talking about the pollen grains. So it's supposed to be microspores. Yep. This is megaspores is females. So yeah, one small little, yeah. But a pine tree is considered the sporophytes. Yeah, that's correct. The pine life cycle around of mitosis is interposed between meiosis and fertilization. Yes, because the embryo develops from that. So, all right, moving on to angiosperms, the flowering plants. So I'll talk about some features of angiosperms. Basically, they have seeds and flowers. Okay. The roles that animals play in the angiosperm life cycle, aka pollination and seed dispersal. And then I'm going to try to describe this process called double fertilization.
Is that kind of tough?
I don't know, it's just really wordy and just, I don't know. If you just like understand like the end product, then I think you'll be okay. I don't really care about how it happens, just know that it does happen. So, all right, a little bit of an introduction. All right, so the ovule is going to be surrounded by diploid tissues. So the ovule is kind of like the female reproductive part, if you will. I don't want to say ovary. It's not exactly an ovary. It does include some other parts. But it's going to be enclosed in a diploid tissue at the time of pollination, when that pollen lands. I also want to talk about a carpel. It is a modified leaf, and it's going to surround the seeds, and the carpel is going to turn into the fruit. So you can see with the carpel evolution, they think that it had some type of modified leaf structure with the sporangia, which is where, you know, you would find a megasporangia or a microsporangia, but in this case, the female part. And it somehow just kind of closed itself around, and the sporangia are now like protected inside the carpel. Okay. And then it has flowers and seeds. I'll talk about this diagram here because your book doesn't talk about stamen. So the male reproductive part is called the stamen, and it's made up of an anther and a filament. So when you have the anther and a filament, that's the male reproductive part, stamens, where pollen is produced. And how that happened is, again, a modified leaf, and there's the male sporangia, and the leaf just got reduced, and what you see is just the anther left on a stalk called the filament. So this is the female. The female's associated with carpel, and the male is the stamen. So when we try to sort out the angiosperm, how they came about, it can be pretty complicated. First off, they're very, very diverse. There's over 300,000 types of angiosperms, flowering plants out there. You know, with gymnosperms, there's only like 1,000 total, and 700 of them are conifers, roughly. So angiosperms went through a rapid diversification after Pangea broke up, because now you have these plants that are experiencing different climates, and they're undergoing changes to their environments and trying to adapt to it. So with the move to new environments, we have flower production. Talk about the benefits of producing flowers, the ability to attract pollinators to help them move that pollen, the male gametophytes. And we also get a development of broad leaves with very, very dense veins, lots of branching, complex venation. We do have a few fossils that we think were precursors to the angiosperm. Archaea fructus fossils show both male and female reproductive structures, but they noticed that it lacked sepals and petals, and that's the flower part of angiosperms. So maybe this was a precursor and somehow it evolved later to attract pollinators. Another huge fossil, this is not a fossil, this is a basal living organism, but it's very, very primitive, so it's considered an angiosperm, but it's very, very, very primitive, like it just barely checks the box for being an angiosperm, is the Amberilla trichopoda. And you only find it in this like island off the coast of like Australia or New Guinea. But we also think that might be the bridge between, angiosperms and whatever was before an angiosperm. So not only do we have rapid diversification, and this happened in a kind of a short period of time, but we also have horizontal gene transfer, right? Genes moving from one species to another. And that was discussed, like plants, they take in whatever. So going back to that Amberilla trichopoda, which we think is the closest living relative to the earliest angiosperm, when we analyze the sequence, we find that it only has 20 out of the 31 known mitochondrial protein genes from other plants. So it's like, where did the others come from? So yeah, we've noticed that flowering plants have mitochondrial genes from mosses. Mosses can grow on flowering plants, so maybe there was some genetic swappage going on there. So horizontal gene transfer is the only plausible explanation for the presence of moss mitochondrial genes in the Amberilla. All right. Oh my gosh, flowers have. Flowers hose the gametophyte.
I wasn't gonna.
Flowers. Yeah, I don't know what the heck I was typing there. Flowers.
The book says house.
House. Okay, thank you.
So just change it to house.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess. Oh boy. Okay, so what is a flower? Flowers, okay, are basically modified stems with some modified leaves. And the common feature is that when a flower originates, so a primordium is like the young plant itself. So it's going to form a little bud at the end of a stalk called the pedicel, and from the pedicel, you're going to form a base called a receptacle. And from the receptacle is where all the flowering parts are going to be attached. So the receptacle is kind of the base of it. And so I think I have a picture on the next slide that shows the receptacle. So don't write everything on this slide. I want you to write this bullet point right here. The modified leaves of this branch are of 4 types: sepals, petals, stamens, and carpels. These are the 4 modified leaves that are attached to the receptacle.
Attached to the receptacle.
Yep, they are attached to the receptacle. So if you take a look at this cross section of this flower, it kind of looks like a tiger lily in a way, but here's the receptacle, the base. And you can see that the petals, this orange structure, is attached to it. The sepals are the leafy looking petals. They're green on the outside, you know? So there's the sepals. There's one sepal there, and that looks somewhat like a sepal. And then we also have the stamens. The stamen is the male reproductive part. The stamen includes the anther and the filament. So there's the anther and the filament. You can see it's attached to the receptacle. And then the carpel. And the carpel also has another term called pistil. And maybe you want to put parenthesis after carpel and write pistil. Your book uses carpel. There are other books that use pistil. So the pistil and the carpel are the same thing, but that is the female reproductive part, and it is made up of 3 things: the stigma, which is the very end, the style, which is the tube that connects it to the ovary. Okay, so the pistil and the carpel, they're the same thing, but it's made up of the stigma, style, and ovary. Now, all 4 of these modified leaves are arranged in a whorl, okay? And so that's what I want to talk about now. So they're usually attached in some type of circular pattern. And starting from the outermost and working our way towards the center, the outermost is your sepals. Those are the green leaves that surround the petals. Then the next whorl in, that's your petals. They usually have color to them to attract pollinators. They could be separate, they could be fused together. Some flowers don't have petals, okay? So that could be completely gone, you know. So you see here the purple petals. The third whorl is the male gametophyte, Angiosperms. So that's our stamen, which is made up of the anther and the filament. And then finally in the center is the female gametophyte, also known as the gynoecium. So that's where we're going to find the carpel, which is made up of the 3 things: stigma, style, and ovary. And if I wanted to be very specific about the ovary is made up of 2 parts called the ovule and the ovary wall. So in order to be basically classified as a flower, you need a receptacle, okay, you need that pedicel, you need a female reproductive part, and you need a male reproductive part, because petals aren't always included. They could be gone, they could be absent, okay? Any questions about what it means to be a flower? Okay. I also think it's kind of cool that this is actually how it's arranged. When you think about all the flowers, you know, when you're younger and you're, you know, peeling the petals, or just, my daughter likes to do that, she just likes to take apart flowers. Yeah, that's actually how it's arranged, and the female part is always dead center. So it's kind of cool.
Can we take a picture of the last slide? I know
This slide or this slide?
yeah, did we have to write down like all of that?
No, you just.
No, because this stuff is actually listed here,
Okay.
so you're good.
Alright.
But yet I think you do have an assignment, a plant review packet, where you'll have to label parts of a flower. So I think you'll be okay, but it's pretty generalized. It's not a...
So the fourth whorl, is that the female gametophyte?
Yep, that is the female gametophyte called the gynoecium. Yeah, I guess I should have put female.
I'm just gonna put parentheses with
On the prefix gyno, you know, gynecologist. So yeah. So we've seen the slide already, just showing the evolution of the carpel. They're both modified leaves. Here the leaves covered the sporangia, which produces, you know, the ovary, the ovules. And with the stamen, it just got reduced, and now you're just left with the sporangia for the male part. All right, carpels. So the carpels include, you know, stigma style and the ovary. So at the very, very base of it, that's the ovary. Could contain just one type of egg or thousands of eggs or ovules, but the ovary is going to turn into the fruit eventually. On the opposite end of the carpel, so the part that's kind of away from the ovary, is the stigma. Sometimes it secretes a sticky substance, or maybe it might be feathery in texture because it wants to catch pollen. And so the pollen will stick to it. And what connects the ovary to the stigma is the style. A lot of flowers have ways to attract pollinators. So maybe they might secrete nectar secreting glands. These are called nectaries. And what is nectar? It's a fluid that is sugars. It's got a lot of sugars in it. AA is amino acids. Sorry, that's always my abbreviation for amino acids. So sugars, amino acids, as well as other attractant molecules for pollinators. The next slide is about double fertilization. She's like, here we go. Okay, double fertilization only happens in angiosperms. Gymnosperms, they have single fertilization. So angiosperms, flowering plants, another difference between gymnosperms and angiosperms. They have double fertilization. So I'm going to talk about the female gametophyte. And then I want to talk about the male gametophytes. And then I'll talk about what happens when they pollinate and fertilize. Okay, so here's my megaspore mother cell. Okay, so it's going to turn into like the female egg eventually. And what it's going to do is it's going to grow and swell. And it's going to go through, I think it's 2 rounds of meiosis to get 8 haploid nuclei. So you can see it grows and swells, and you can see that, hey, we have 2, then 2 becomes 4, and then 4 becomes 8. And at the end of this sentence, it says the nuclei are arranged into groups of 4. Here are 4 cells here, and the other 4 are on the opposite ends of the pole. So that's step 1. Step 2. At the same time that this is all happening, we have our integuments, which is labeled here, so the surrounding. So this outer layer right here, you can see it's kind of growing and surrounding the megaspore mother cell, is going to become the seed coat eventually. But now it goes from 1 layer, and then it turns into 2 layers. So there's 2 layers here and 2 layers here. And there's the tiny little opening, the micropyle develops, and that's where you can see that we have a little path for the pollen to travel to get to the female side. Okay, but we're not done yet. Okay, now we're going to focus in on these haploid cells and why they are on opposite ends of the poles. So you can see that they are arranged in 2 groups of 4, but they're not going to stay that way for long. From each group, so there were 4 here and there were 4 here, they're going to send 1 towards the center. So 1 nucleus from each group of 4 migrates towards the center. These 2 become a structure called the polar nuclei. Now they could remain like separate, if you will. They can form a single cell with 2 haploid nucleus, or they can fuse together to form a diploid nucleus. And don't ask me how it decides. I don't know. So that's the polar nuclei. So now we're left with 3 on opposite ends of the poles. The 3 that are closest to the opening, the micropyle, they are called the synergids. Of the synergids, one of them is going to become the egg cell, and the other 2 are going to be supporting cells, and they probably will eventually get absorbed by the egg cell. On the opposite end, these 3 are now classified as the antipodals. And as of right now, we don't know their function, but eventually they get broken down. When this is all said and done, I now have the mature female gametophyte. It is an embryo sac. It has 2 layers of integuments. It has an opening called the micropyle. And inside my embryo sac, I have 7 cells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with 8 nuclei. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now my female gametophyte is mature. I think on the next slide I have the thing in blue. Nuh-uh. That is not our bell.
It's 3 minutes earlier than it normally is, but
Okay, well, we'll just... It's homeroom today? All right, I'm just going to keep going. There's no way, no. So that embryo sac on the inside, 8 nuclei and 7 cells. This is my mature female gametophyte. This gametophyte is completely dependent on the sporophyte. That's where it gets its nutrition, but it is multicellular. Okay, we have 7 cells, and the nuclei are, they're haploid. So we have a multicellular haploid individual. right. Do we want to go one more slide?
Sure.
It's just this is it for the male side. Pollen production.
So this is the boy side?
This is the boy side. So while the female while all of that is happening within the female gametophyte, now we're going to talk about what's happening in the boy gametophyte. Okay, so on the male side we have anthers, and you're going to see that the anthers have these 4 chambers, and they're lined with cells that provide nutrition. Okay. Inside the chambers we're going to find microspore mother cells, and they will go through meiosis and produce 4 microspores. At first, the microspores are arranged in a tetrad, and I'll show you a picture of what that tetrad looks like 2 slides from now. Actually, I'll just show you right now. So this is a tetrad. Okay, so this was a microspore, and then it went through meiosis to form a tetrad. And so it's going to divide once. The tetrads will separate, and now we're going to end up with a binucleate microspore, which is our mature pollen grain. So here is my mature pollen because it's going to separate, so 4 becomes 2, and I have this mature pollen right here. This is a cross-section of the anthers. You can see the 4 chambers. And then these would be the microspore mother cells that produce the spores. Okay. So some more pictures of the tetrads converted into that mature pollen. And then when the anthers, what happens is that when they're mature, then they will dry out, and you can see that it kind of cracks open right here, and then the pollen gets released. So we'll pick it up tomorrow with pollination. So.